Good morning, and welcome to your HART Board of Directors meeting. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome everyone here this morning. We have a pretty long agenda, but we're going to try to get through it as fast as we possibly can. We have minutes from the January 7, 2019 meeting. I hope you had an opportunity to review them. We have a motion to approve those minutes.
Move for adoption.
Motion by Councilman Sisler, second by Commissioner Overman. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion's adopted. Public input. Everyone speaking this morning on agenda items will have 3 minutes. The first speaker is Glenn. Is it Eich? Ike. Ike. You're up.
Good morning. My name is Glenn Ike. I live at 2900 University Square Drive in Tampa. I've spent time in New York City, San Francisco, Miami, Philadelphia, Buffalo, and other major cities in the U.S. I've also spent time in London and Copenhagen. I've used mass transit systems in all these places, and mass transit has been my sole means of transportation here in Tampa since 2003. By far, this county has the most inefficient mass transit system of any I've seen, and I've heard the same from everyone I've met from other major cities in the country. In the past, the bus system has been gradually scaled down, and in 2017 scaled down drastically because I assume the already dismal system was not cost effective. Well, the voters have taken that out of the equation. The people of Hillsborough County have decided they're willing to pay you directly in order to improve the mass transit system, which, to be honest, is a bit of an embarrassment. On today's agenda, it's mentioned that outreach will be one of the topics of discussion. There's a large base of residents who should be your major source, if not sole source, of input, and that is the patrons who rely on the bus system to get to work and to school every day. These people do not typically work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and if you tailor your schedules around those hours and days, you're not serving the people who need to use the service most. I'd like to see what I've not seen since I've been using the buses here in Tampa. I'd like to see questionnaires on every bus where the bus schedules are posted that can be filled out and handed to any bus driver with simple questions like, what is the maximum time you wish to wait for a bus? Should the major bus routes run 24 hours a day? And would you like the buses to run on weekends on a schedule similar to weekdays? And are electric buses, autonomous trams, greenways with jogging lanes and bicycle paths and overhead gondolas of any concern to you? Actually, I know the answers that you'll most likely receive to those questions. But there are aspects of mass transportation I've not been hearing discussed by any agency of this county or city, nor few of the political candidates that are running right now. It's almost as though you don't want to know what the people of Hillsborough County want, but instead want to tell them what they want. A community outreach program is useless unless you ask those who will actually benefit from the money you have been given and you're planning to spend. There are immediate needs that shouldn't take months to plan and should take priority over any plans to modernize the mass transit system in Hillsborough. We need more buses, electric or otherwise, and more drivers to serve more of the residents in more areas and more often. Simply, and I'm sure that's why the voters chose to give you the money to improve the system. Lastly, the community you should be reaching will not come to you. You need to go to them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Dustin Lemke.
Dustin Lemke, I live at 304 East Ross here in Tampa. I'm just speaking about the Independent Oversight Committee. I've applied to be a member of that as a HART appointee, and I just would appreciate that opportunity. I work at Hillsborough Community College. Professor for 13 years, just became a dean about a year ago. So after this, I have to rush off to work because it never stops. But in 2010, I did something a little bit crazy. I paid off my car and then I sold it. And that day I have my first bus ticket that I walked From Nebraska Avenue to Florida to catch HART. I didn't realize how far it was from Nebraska to Florida. It was really hot in June and it was pretty crazy, but I've got that experience. I've been on the bus. I've taken the bus for 8 years. I didn't have a car. Last year I had to buy one again because of my job. It sort of changed things, but I make a commitment to still take HART twice a week, going where I'm going, or walk somewhere so I can do different things for that. I've worked with HART. When the One Bus Away app came out, I was a beta tester for that. It really changed taking the bus because you knew if your bus was early, if it was on time, if it was late. By the way, the worst is early because it scares you because you're not there yet. So you have to go even quicker for that. When Mission Max came out, actually, I was one of the routes that had improved my time because I live in the core of the city, and it would actually help me a little bit get to work quicker for that. Two things that I would say about independent oversight. One is after my 8-year experiment, people ask me lots of questions and they think that maybe public transportation is the only answer. And I think it's a great answer, but I think it's one piece of a complicated puzzle. I think you need to be able to walk. I think you need to be able to bike. I think you need to be able to take a bus. And I think you sometimes need cars. Right now, I'm helping my 88-year-old neighbor get groceries once a week, and it's very difficult to get an 88-year-old on the bus to go to Publix and get groceries for that. So you need different modes of transportation. And that was one of the great things that I learned from my project. We have a diverse city with a diverse group of people, and we need diverse transportation. And it's what I like about the tax that was passed, is it's not one answer. It looks at transportation holistically for that. The second thing I would say is I think there needs to be somebody on the IOC that has experience with different modes of transportation in the city and HART. Honestly, that might not be me. It might be somebody else. Maybe there's somebody else that would be a better spokesperson and could do that. But I think you need that person. It's terrible to miss the last bus of the night because you got to figure out how you're getting home. And that's when I learned it takes 1 hour and 10 minutes to walk from work to home. It's terrible. It's not too bad to get rained on when you're getting the bus. It's terrible to get rained on the way to work, when you're trying to do something like that. Many people ask me about the safety of the bus system, and I can tell them I never had an issue with the bus system. I told all of my students that they should be taking the bus. I did learn that students maybe have been tricking me for a few years. They would always say, I'm sorry, I'm late to class because the bus was late. And I learned that it was actually probably they were late to the bus. The bus wasn't really the issue. It was maybe the user of the bus that was the issue. So I think that there should be somebody that's used the system and is familiar with the system. So thank you for listening, and I would appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you. Last speaker is Chris Gleason.
Chris Gleason, 7903 West Whitewater Court, 33637. I'm here today supporting discussion item C, electric buses. As a frequent user of HART as my means of transportation, as HART expands service and retires old buses, we should look to the future of what is best for HART, its ridership, and the general public. Cleaner and quieter buses are the future, as internal combustion engines running diesel or compressed natural gas are loud, smelly, and hot. Hillsborough County has the worst air quality in the state. Anything that HART, a public agency, can do to better serve its ridership and the general public, it should. All these emissions from burning fossil fuels have effects on people's health and the health of our county, as CNG emits as much greenhouse gases as diesel does, and we are very sensitive to any sea level rise. The added capital cost of electric buses is made up by the operating costs during the life of the bus, as fuel costs are almost non-existent price electricity. And with almost no moving parts, the maintenance costs are a lot less than a comparable CNG bus. As diesel and CNG buses age, they only get dirtier. But because of our changing power generation sources, electric buses only get cleaner. We have a unique opportunity right now to receive 8 electric buses by the end of the year. We're just waiting 2.5 years to receive our first electric buses. As more and more transit agencies go electric, we fall further behind. So make a commitment to the future for the benefit of HART, its ridership, and the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's our last speaker on regular agenda items. We're going to now move into discussion items. The first one is appointment to the Tampa Historic Streetcar Board of Directors. Mr. Smith.
Yes, good morning. As you can see in your backup, Ms. Kemp has other commitments that will not allow her to meet time constraints associated with the Tampa Historic Streetcar Board, and we need to elect an alternate to serve in her place.
So what I'd like to do is open the floor for nominations to serve as alternate for the Tampa Historic Streetcar.
Is there anyone wishing to serve as an
Ms.
alternate?
Shanahan.
Pardon?
I was going to nominate Councilman Mike Suarez.
You know, I wish you could do that, but they actually, because I was the alternate, I became the member now, so.
Oh, good.
If you want to switch me out, that's okay.
No. So we're voting on the alternate.
We're voting on the alternate.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, my mistake.
No problem.
Anyone wishing to serve as an alternate to the Historic Streetcar Board?
You may nominate yourself.
Going once?
I'm already on the list for alternate, I
Okay.
think.
Any objection to Commissioner Overman? Commissioner Overman serves as the alternate.
Okay.
It's unanimous.
Now the appointment to the independent is there anything else, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, on that issue?
No, sir, that's it.
Okay, let's move to the appointment to the independent oversight committee, Mr. Smith.
Yes, you have in your backup item, I don't believe it was in your notebook when you received it, but it was a handout today. It indicates the results of the polling of the board, the recommendations by the different directors. And you can see that Sean Shaw got the most votes at 6. Ray Shermonte got the second most votes at 5. Mr. Lemke was third at number 4, et cetera, down the list. So what I would, you need to take action on these. If there is a motion to approve the top 2 vote getters, that's one way to do it, or you can do it one at a time. It's your, Ms. Smith?
Well, no, hold on. Before we go any further, I understand Mr. Sharamonte has already been appointed to an oversight committee with one of the constitutionals.
Then
So
he
was
is already
removed.
on the board.
He's already
So your
removed.
top 2 would be Sean Shaw and Dustin Lemke.
I'll make a motion to select the top 2 vote getters excluding Mr. Giaramone.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion to appoint Mr. Sean Shaw and Mr. Dustin Lemke to our independent oversight committee by Mr. McCaddy, second by, who was that, Commissioner Kemp. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed is likewise. Motion's adopted. So our appointees will be Sean Shaw and Dustin Lemke. Okay, we're moving to the regular meeting agenda still. Mr. Seward, BOCC HART discussion on funding of buses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In December of 2018, I stood before you and had a plan to move forward with additional frequencies and a bus order due to the passing of the referendum in November. However, just prior to me getting to the podium, we learned that we were, there was a lawsuit filed. We all are aware of it. I pulled my recommendation back for the funding of the buses and for the additional service on the street based on the unknown of when that money would be available. So at the January 9th BOCC meeting, Commissioner Kemp brought forward a motion to the BOCC in light of HART not being able to move forward with its bus purchase, brought forward a motion asking the county to consider fronting or making available as a backstop $10 million from their CIT reserves to be able to allow and afford us to be able to move forward with the bus purchases. The question that arose that was very much a sticking point, and again, this is from my standing from the podium, was HART's ability, or in this case, inability to ever pay back the BOCC for that funding if, one, the sales tax revenue never comes to fruition, or two, it gets delayed even further and we receive a bill after we order buses, specifically electric buses, with the inability to pay the county back. I answered honestly, as I always do, what would happen if that money wasn't received? My response was, we wouldn't be paying the county back anytime in the near future. So, having that discussion, it came back. We went ahead and had staff discuss the issue with the bus manufacturer, Proterra, on what kind of deal that we could make and strike with them that would solve this issue. One, my goal was to not have the county have to front any money or HART be dependent on any county funding for these buses. So what I can tell you today is staff has discussed with Proterra the opportunity for us to be able to move forward with the configuration, final specifications, charging infrastructure, with a letter of intent from me that this is what we want to do from that company. We were able to use the Georgia Department of Administrative Services contract for supplemental mass transit vehicles and transportation-related vehicles with absolutely no obligation to HART. So essentially, this letter of intent tells Proterra we want to move forward with the acquisition of 8 buses sometime in the spring of 2020 once those buses are manufactured. However, if HART does not have the funding then, which I hope we do, if we don't, we are not obligated to pay Proterra a dime for any of the buses or the work. There is a market for those buses and they realize that. So if they're completed and ready, sitting in a parking lot, someone's going to come and buy them. However, we get the first stab at being able to get that infrastructure. So I have a letter of intent. It'll be from me to Proterra. General Counsel has reviewed the letter of intent. I have copies of the letter of intent that I can provide you today. And what that simply does is, one, it does 2 things. One, it no longer requires the county discussion of helping HART with any of that funding. That is off the table. And 2, it allows us to move forward with planning on these electric vehicles. And if we don't have the money, no harm, no foul. Or if we choose at that time, based on the planning for our out years, that isn't the path we want to pursue, no harm, no foul. We are not on the hook for anything from Proterra, but we are getting the ball moving. So I wanted to report that this morning.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Mr. Seward, for doing an incredible job, I think, trying to bring this about. I think it's really important for us to move to the future, and I do see an all-electric future, and that's many of the large agencies are going that way. I think it's important also for members of this board and others to recognize, many people don't recognize that it takes 2 years to get a bus, typically. If you were to sign on the dotted line today, it takes 2 years, that's the standard. But you pay for it upon delivery. So that is how it's typically done. Proterra, and I really wanted to see us move quicker with our dollars, if we possibly could, to get additional bus service on the roads. And that requires us having buses. I was more than taken aback when Proterra said, first of all, that they could do it within a timeline of a year rather than 2 years. But this is just amazing. I can't understand any reason we wouldn't try to move forward on this, because this is amazing. It's obligation-free on our part. I'm sure that Proterra can put those buses elsewhere, but I think it'd be a great step for us to try to move forward on.
For clarification, I wanted it will not be by the end of the year. The delivery of the first bus would be February of 2020, and the delivery of the final 8th bus would be March. But yes, to the point of usually taking 2 years of the manufacturing process, it's very much condensed with the plan that I'm nodding in the audience, yes, that's the plan.
Ms. Shanahan, you recognize.
Thank you. A couple of questions. You mentioned the Georgia Economic Development. Are we piggybacking on a contract that already exists with Proterra in Georgia? Yes. Or did I just hear that? Okay.
Yes, Georgia Department of Administrative Services contract for supplemental mass transit.
And would there be, if we had the funding, would there be a discount to the price that we're paying? I mean, I think it's a smart and clever pathway you found to get the order in with no liability or no funding. I find that amazing from a private sector standpoint. It's like, sort of like that's how government works. But I'm wondering if we're paying at the high end, are we paying the same price everybody else is paying? Is there a discount we're missing
It'll be
because
the-
we're not paying cash? I mean, there's something,
It'll be the same price off of the contract that anybody else would be paying.
what are you laughing at, Chairman?
You-
I mean, it's too good to be true.
You're sitting there saying, this is too good to be true.
Exactly.
On your face.
From a private sector, I don't know how Proterra's going to be in existence in 2 years if this is how they're going to sell the buses. Okay, well, I did want a clarification on the Georgia relationship, and there's no response. It's just a clear piggyback.
No, and we're not, and again, we're not, it will require, for us to move forward with the actual purchase, it will require board action. I will have to come back in the spring with the approval to purchase the aid, with the evidence that we have the funding. So again, it's more of a promissory note now of, we want these, we really want them, you're willing to give them, but we don't have to take them, which again goes back to it is a very good deal.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you. I'm very excited about all of this. I was very glad to hear that we were able to partner with the Georgia contract to be able to make this happen in an expedited manner. And I was just going to ask Mr. Smith, have you reviewed all of the terms to make sure that we're clearly understanding what it is that Proterra is offering us? That seems too good to be true.
I'm sorry, I did review the letter of intent, made some changes in it that I believe Mr. Stewart has incorporated in the document.
We have.
With that being said, I'd like to move forward with
I'll second.
authorizing.
Okay, there's a motion and a second that we move forward. Ms. Melendez, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just had a quick comment on, and again, I mean, from the standpoint of cleverness and making this happen, you know, kudos on that point. But with regards to, and also Commissioner Kemp for, you know, making this possible through the BOCC, assuming, you know, everything moved forward and we, you know, and we were to get the buses, I guess this is for a capital purchase, correct? Not the actual operation and maintenance of the buses, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about, okay, we you know, everything happens, we purchase the buses, they're delivered. What about the cost and because the one thing that, I don't know, I'd just like to hear a little bit about what's the plan after we acquire them, because there are costs, there's, you know, training and staffing, and can you tell us a little bit about that, John?
Sure. Actually, the next item will cover that.
I mean, if we should
But
wait.
assuming that we move forward, so the assumption would be if we move forward with the purchase of these buses, that means that the sales tax revenue is in play. That would be the only way. We have no, as this board well knows, we do not have the depth in our fund balance to go out and buy $13 million worth of bus infrastructure.
So if I may, just a quick clarification. While you did a good job of avoiding the liability in the purchase, we're kind of deferring the liability a little bit as far as if something were to happen with the tax, and we purchased the buses, we'd have electric buses that we then couldn't operate or maintain.
We wouldn't buy them if we don't have the funding available.
Okay.
That's
So
it.
from a
Just-
timing standpoint, we'll know if we have the funding. This will all be cleared
And that's the
up.
only way we'll purchase the
Okay.
buses if the funding is
Okay.
available.
Good deal. Okay, thanks. So there is no deferred liability. We still, okay, thank you.
Councilman Suarez, recognized.
Jeff, I think you just answered my question, which is, I wasn't sure if the county was going to have a commitment if for some reason, so that, the vote that had been done at the BOCC, it does not, that was not part of it, and Mike Merrill and the county has not said, we will commit to it if the tax, I just want to make sure we're
No.
right about that. Okay.
No. And as a matter of fact, I was waiting for this morning's meeting to have this discussion before I notify county administration that we no longer need their assistance on this issue.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Chair.
Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Commissioner Knight and Kemp to move forward. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion is adopted. Move to sales tax planning update, Mr. Seward and Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I made a commitment to the board last month after Mr. Walker spoke to you concerning the next steps in the planning for the sales tax revenue. And I do have a proposal that I want to talk with you about. However, before I do that, I think it's important that Mr. Smith talk to you concerning the memorandum that he sent out about the timing of the availability of funds, because I believe there's still some, I don't want to say confusion, but misrepresentation on when the possible sales tax revenue will be available, irrespective of the outcome of the lawsuit. So if I could have Mr. Smith elaborate.
Certainly. I would like to start off first by making sure everyone is aware we are, of course, are in litigation. So I would caution you with respect to comments and questions that you make. I would not like to see a quote from you in the next pleading we get that is used against us. So be careful what you say or ask. People get creative in terms of how they will change the way you articulate your questions. I'd also tell you there's been a certain difficulty in communicating. When people are represented by counsel, there's requirements normally that you go through counsel to communicate. So I was following that standard procedure for lawyers with the county, but we had some miscommunications, and I have had clearance now, so I spoke at length yesterday with Christine Beck, the county attorney. I also spoke at length with Mike Merrill, the county administrator, and I've been speaking consistently with Alan Zimmett, their outside counsel. So I wanted to make sure you realize, which is why I sent you the email last night, including the summary of the allocation from the clerk. It was a different answer to a different question, but that allocation is the allocation that's in Article 11. It is the allocation that the entire county leadership team that I spoke with is supporting and is recommending to their board, and the board will have a meeting, I believe it's this Wednesday, to take action on a proposal on how to proceed. I'm prepared to summarize that public information for you today, but let me deal with the funding issue first. I know maybe most of the county commissioners have all of this information by virtue of having a briefing, but I know the rest of you do not. But first on the funding, I sent you a memorandum that explained how the timing works if we follow the written word of Article 11. I did not bring Article 11 with me today, but I've read it so many times, I'm pretty sure we're talking about 1106. What 1106 indicates is that you must submit your plans, for example, a plan to purchase buses, by September 30 of any given year for approval of expenditure in the next calendar year. Now that language to me is unequivocal. It means basically you cannot spend money until 2020. I have heard there's an alternative view that perhaps the drafters of Article 11 simply didn't address this, and that maybe it can be filled in through the process that's currently going to be engaged in. I only provided you an analysis based on the text. I tend to be a textual analyst. I think that's how you read laws. I'm a little concerned that if we get a little too creative, we may call into question the drafting of Article 11. So I would not be inclined to go in that route, but others may have a different view. I just fill you in so you understand what the situation is. I also understand from the clerk that essentially DOR is going to start sending money to the clerk, who is going to be the conduit of funds, approximately on March 25th. The clerk has, I believe, 5 days to distribute those funds to the recipients. The allocation of the county, to HART, and to the other cities. There's some questions we need to answer, which are, for example, when we receive those funds, it would be appropriate to invest them in order to get some return on the funds. As you know, governmental entities invest in low return, very low risk types of investments, but big amounts of money can still generate significant returns. So there's a question, and that'll be handled by our former CFO, your current CEO. He'll know adequately how to invest that. The other question, though, that is not answered yet is, can we use those funds in the interim? Meaning if the litigation were successful, which I firmly believe it will not be, if we spend return on investment, would that be part of a disgorgement or return of funds? I don't even believe disgorgement's a possibility as a remedy, but I don't want to go there right now because of the litigation. So that's probably about all I'd like to say about that at this time. What I would like to do, if for those of you who do not know, is give you a précis on exactly how we're going to proceed. The county is going to have for review on Wednesday a recommendation that they validate a certain amount of the proceeds. A bond validation proceeding has the consequences of significant precedential value, meaning it's binding, and it's binding in lots of different ways. We, as a board, are not in privity with that bond. HART as an entity is not, but we would be able to obtain what is called collateral estoppel, which means the issues addressed and resolved in that litigation someone who wanted to argue against HART's expenditure of funds could be collaterally estopped from arguing those. So the bond validation approach has caused some consternation among some of our private sector participants because in part it leaves HART out, and I'll get to that in a minute, and in part because I don't know that they were sufficiently familiar with the fact that local governments cannot deficit spend. So you are not going to spend money until you are absolutely certain you do not have to pay it back. Because if you have to pay it back, where are you going to get the money to pay it back from if you've already spent it? I think that understanding has now been made clear, and I think some of the gap that has existed among the various participants is closing, and there's more trust that's been generated. I will tell you, everyone I have talked to, and I've talked to everyone, at least their lawyers, is working in the same direction. We want to preserve the allocation that has an allocation for HART that is included in Article 11. So the county will pass, hopefully, it's up to the county commissioners to decide, but if they pass the motion to go for a bond validation, they will file the next day. The advantage of the bond validation is not only its precedential value, it also receives expedited treatment. It will be given priority on the calendar with the circuit court. We are also going to try to merge it with the existing case. That may make moot the standing issue with regard to current plaintiff, but it will get us to issue quicker, and we will try to preserve that May 3rd date as the date currently for cross motions for summary judgment, meaning resolution of the current litigation, as the decision date on the bond validation. The other advantage to the bond validation is if someone appeals it, and the attorney on the other side is a consummate appellate attorney, it goes directly to the Florida State Supreme Court. It does not go to the Second District Court where this attorney happened to serve, but so that saves us considerable time. It also is treated on an expedited basis at the Florida Supreme Court. So this is the quickest way, in my opinion, and I believe in the county attorney's opinion, to get to a final resolution that is binding and works for everybody. Just as an historical matter, for those of you who were in the community at the time, this is similar to what happened with the CIT that was challenged by ex-Mayor Poe. He had a case pending. It was merged in or consolidated with the bond validation. He literally won as he had the tax overturned at the validation level at the circuit court, but it was overturned on appeal at the Florida Supreme Court. And the people who handled that case included Christine Beck and Mike Merrill. So they're very familiar with the situation. I have confidence in their ability to handle this and handle it very adequately. That is the general concept. I would want to help you understand why there's been some concern on my part. Because HART is not in privity to the bond validation proceeding, we can participate, we can intervene. By privity, I mean we do not have a contractual right to enforce anything that comes out of that process. We can argue collateral estoppel, but we're not in privity. So my position has been, and I've articulated this both to Alford Transportation, who I think concurs, and the county, which I think understands, and that is that we need an interlocal agreement, because an interlocal agreement is the only document that puts HART at the table. I believe, my recommendation to you is, you need to be at the table as a board with your own enforcement rights. You're not subject to what happens in the bond validation proceeding, and you're not subject to what happens elsewhere. So that's why there's been a little bit of an issue on the interlocal. I was advised yesterday that there will also be a discussion about the interlocal agreement in front of the county commission on Wednesday. So we are moving forward on both fronts. So generally, there's a favorable state of affairs as it stands right now. Lastly, the last timing issue, I'd tell you, we have depositions that are being set for the plaintiff on February 25th. There's a difference of opinion as to whether that should go forward for a variety of reasons, but I believe it's going to be set, and we'll see how that goes. The motions pending, motion to dismiss, motions for lack of standing will be heard on March 14th. And the motions for summary judgment are currently scheduled for May 3rd, and that's where we want to have the final hearing on the bond validation. So that's the summary. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Okay, I see a bunch of hands going up, so I'm gonna do it this way. First, I'm gonna start with Mr. McKennick. You recognize?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Smith. I think that was a pretty thorough discussion given the circumstances, but can you explain more about the interlocal agreement? My understanding is that's actually a requirement for providing a mechanism for distribution of the proceeds under Chapter 212, is that right? And could you just elaborate on that a little
Okay,
more?
there's actually two requirements. There's one under Chapter 212, and there's also one that the clerk has. Clerk needs an interlocal in order to disperse funds. And so there's two reasons to have an interlocal. That's probably all I should say at this point, but I'd be happy to elaborate if you have any further questions. It's unique to HART in particular because the statute's clear. The interlocal agreement in the statute says that the one between the municipality and the county needs to be revisited every 5 years, ostensibly because there could be more municipalities. There's not going to be more HARTs, so I would like to make sure our interlocal agreement has sufficient independence to not have to be revisited every 5 years. We need a 30-year interlocal because we need to bond the funds. And you can't bond the funds if you have a short-term commitment of the cash flow stream.
Just one follow-up. Are you asking this board to endorse the idea for you, authorize you to proceed in that direction with the other entities? Or?
That would be helpful. The county is going to be looking at, I'm not sure it's a draft interlocal, it may be, it'll certainly be a conceptual approach, and it would be helpful to be authorized to move forward in discussions with the county and the other participants to try to finalize that and perhaps get it back to this board at its March meeting.
Okay, Mr. Melendez, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for that analysis. Quick question regarding your memo dated the 24th, and thank you for kind of clarifying that timing issue. I guess I'd like to kind of draw an example using kind of the electric buses that we just discussed. So that's a capital purchase, but the plans for the use of those buses, would those plans need to be approved by the IOC before September 30th?
If we're going to spend transit surtax proceeds, yes.
Okay.
And we are.
So there is a little, in the way that I see it, there's a little bit of risk if the IOC, for whatever reason, didn't agree with or didn't want us to move forward with plans for the electric buses, they could actually shoot that down?
Well, their discretion is limited to determining whether or not the plan we submit is consistent with Article 11. So if it's consistent with Article 11 and bus purchases would be, I think, ineluctably, then their denial would be, I think, outside their authority.
Okay. I mean, they could deny it, but it would be outside.
They could deny it, and that's one of the issues we've had discussions about with the plaintiff. He's concerned about the IOC's role. I have recommended, and I think this is public record, that we consider having a provision that makes the appellate body of an IOC decision the BOCC. It gives the BOCC the rightful authority. It is their charter, and it provides an elected's review of an ultimate decision. I know IOCs, they wanted it to be independent, it is, but I think at some point if they make bad decisions, rather than go to court, it'd be easier to go to the BOCC, at least as the first level appeal. BOCs may not like that though, so that may not happen.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, I just bring that up because, you know, we certainly wouldn't want to get wrapped around the axle where we make a capital purchase and for whatever reason there's this difference, not that I think that there would be, you know, I think the spirit of it would be that we're doing things consistent with our planning, and the IOC, we're all generally like-minded, and there's going to be that parity. But I just wanted to bring it up.
Let me say something here, and I think that probably Mr. Smith can say something better than I can. You got to remember we're in litigation, and we're starting to dig into the weeds, and we don't need to be digging that deep into the weeds. Am I right, Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Okay. So just be ever mindful of that. We do not want to say something in this meeting that could very well come back and haunt us. So be very careful what you're saying. Okay, just be ever mindful of that. We're digging down in some weeds here, and no telling what's down there. We don't need to be doing that.
Yeah, balance with diligence. I think that.
All right, Mr. Suarez, your face.
Thank you, I appreciate it. David, you mentioned a couple of things that made me think about some issues that might be in there. Is the city a participant in this litigation in partnership with HART concerning these issues?
Well, the primary plaintiff will be the county because it's their bond validation. The city, I'm sure, will participate. We've had 3 different lawyers from the city, and they're involved at every turn.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure about that. And secondly, you made a comment about the MOU and a 5-year for municipalities versus trying to get a 30-year for HART. And I'm going to have to go back to our attorneys to find out about that information, because I'm curious about what you just said. And the third thing, you made a comment about things that we say publicly. I think that I may be the only one on this board that's running for office right now. And these issues come up every single forum and every single debate. Now, obviously, during the heat of a political campaign, sometimes you're going to say some things. I want to make sure that I do not cause any kind of problems with the case going forward. And I'm not sure what kind of weight it has when people are political candidates versus also participants in a lawsuit. So I want to make sure that I'm careful what I say, and I may want to have to meet with you to make sure that we don't have any issues that come forward that cause a problem for the litigation.
That's fine. Anytime you'd like to meet.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chair.
With regards to the discussion at the Boulder County Commission's next
Mr.
Wednesday.
Put your mic down.
On a potential for a interlocal agreement, is there a draft of a document that'll be discussed, or just will it be in theory?
I believe there is a draft in some capacity, and I have requested both telephonically and by email a copy of that.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
I really do appreciate you bringing this forward so that we can at least start thinking about what our process is going to look like. And, you know, I'm committed to making sure the voters' will is actually fulfilled. And so I'm working with the county's team to come up with dedicated plans. When you talked about the schedule for funding, I too thought that it was funding as we normally do, plan for the next year. But I did think that there was some flexibility in that first year in the language. So I'll work with you to try and work with that, because I'm clearly working with, you know, all the stakeholders to say, what is our list going to look like? What's our plan going to look like? Are we ready? Are we going to do what we need to do, which is what the voters asked us to do. So I'm looking forward to more conversation about that timeline. Because I think the priorities, you know, priorities for all of us need to be addressed when it comes to some of the comments that we heard from our audience today. So, thank you.
Well, hold on.
Discussion, I'd like to make a motion.
Before we do that, you want to, hold on. Before you,
Riding off of what Mr. Smith has talked about, and a total non-legal interpretation, we're going with the plan that we're not going to be able to touch the sales tax revenue until January of 2020. And that was really not in the planning horizon that we started just a couple of months ago. So when Jared Walker came forward last month, had a conversation with this board on the next steps, I again promised to work on something to come back, a proposal to move forward on the planning side of the house. So I'm happy to report that we have had the opportunity to have Mr. Walker work with Tyndale Oliver. If you recall, Tyndale Oliver did our COA and our TDP major update a year and a half ago, which resulted in Mission Max. So having them have the opportunity to reopen and start the planning process for the sales tax makes sense. And having Jared Walker as a participant makes even better sense, as a much more global perspective and view, particularly on the public outreach. So what I'm going to report to you today is not the proposal and not the details, but that I will be bringing that proposal back to the February committee meeting, and we'll be back here before you in March for consideration and approval to be able to move forward with the biggest public outreach this organization has ever had that I can see in its 40 years of history. Stakeholders, community leaders, those that ride the buses every day, as our earlier speaker commented on. But this is an opportunity to do not only the short-range plan. We're on a really tight rope here. We have to have a plan submitted by September 30th for 2020, which was those buses will be part of that plan. The same time, we start our budget development within the next 30 days. Mm-hmm. So we are going to be developing a budget on the premise of a plan that hasn't been approved by September 30th, with a budget that has to be approved in the month of September. So we like a challenge. So this will be a very exciting year for sure. But it's really important that we get this planning moving as rapidly as possible. If the board sees this in March, agree to it, and we move forward, we will have to take money out of fund balance to be able to pay for the study. We didn't plan for any extra service or expenditures this year. And we are living within the adopted budget this board adopted in September for the remainder of this year. And if we're looking at January 1st, 2020, you're looking at the first fiscal quarter of 20 of being status quo. So I think it's really important that we understand that expectation. We are working within the confines of a very restricted budget, even though we're going to have a bank account that will be busting at the seams probably within the next few months with money that we cannot spend. So again, I just want to report, I'll be bringing it to the committee for discussion. I'll have the vendor here to talk through what the process would look like, and then bring back in March for final consideration. So, thank you.
Okay, before we start anything else, Mr. Mechanic, you want to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
But Mr. Kemp, did you want to speak to what Mr.
Yes.
Stewart just said? Okay, you recognize.
Again,
hold. You want to speak to what? Okay. So, Ms. Smith, Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you.
Followed by Commissioner Smith.
I just wanted to, again, thank Mr. Seward for bringing forward Jarrett Walker. As I said before, Jarrett Walker's been, I mean, I just think he is nationally, internationally recognized as a premier transit redesign person. As I said before, just as a reminder, he has done Houston, and they didn't get any more money, but they were one of the places that upped their ridership. Portland, Seattle has had amazing improvement. They did have more investment, but they have done a redesign that's amazing. He did Wake County, which is Raleigh. It's very similar to this, and I just happened to Google and find that whole that study online, and it was a project online, and it's pretty amazing. It speaks to all the incredible engagement that he does in bringing communities along and what he does. He's now been contracted by New York to look at their redesign. It's just, he's done stellar work and really transformed the way that transit organizations are working. So I'm very happy to have that, and I look forward to the presentation next month. But again, I want to thank Mr. Seward for bringing Jarrett Walker in and having this opportunity.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. Yes, I'm thrilled to hear about this public outreach effort that's going to surpass all the previous public outreach efforts and include Jarrett Walker, who is so experienced in doing this. We have, everyone knows, a lot of enthusiasm out in the community for this, for seeing the transit improvements that are going to be the fruit of the referendum that they just passed. But it is passed countywide, and so that's a big area with a very diverse population, diverse communities that all have different needs and need to be brought into the discussion of how their tax dollars are going to be spent, and we'll need to manage the expectations and inform people of how the process is going to be going forward, and then take their input and incorporate that public input into the plans and priorities of spending everybody's money, because everybody's paying into this, and so it's important to include them in the process, and I'm very excited about that, and I'm really excited about having Jarrett Walker be a part of that. So thank you very much.
Ms. Shanahan, did I see you?
Yeah. Is this a sole source, no bid contract that we're giving without any other competition?
Yes.
And what's the approximate cost of the contract?
The approximate cost right now with no negotiations is around $400,000.
And what are the expected KPIs of the contract?
We're working on those. I've had the proposal for 24 hours. But they will have plenty of KPIs, expected deliverables, penalties, and everything else that we have in our contract. However, there will be options brought forward along with this contract of other avenues to pursue.
So the 400,000 is just for Mr. Walker?
No, it's for both. It's for the combined work of both consultants.
Okay.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
It is becoming readily clear that we have a massive agenda for 2019. And I think it's critically important, and I appreciate you managing expectations, and now having the schedule and when we can start spending the money is probably helpful as well. But I think it's so critically important for us to recognize the work that's being done by the various subcommittees of this board, the Transit Oriented Development agenda that we have, and managing that grant and finding the best ways to expand across the county not only the service of HART, but creating the opportunity of the economic development here. We are also looking at the streetcar project and bringing that forward. Having Mr. Walker available while we bring on a new CEO and look at all the things that are on our agenda, it is a massive undertaking. So while we may have a lot of money there, hopefully someday with this working out, there's a lot going on, and I'm very proud of the process of looking at what is on our agenda, the various subcommittees, and then having the potential of an expert with experience in developing those kinds of projects and of that magnitude, I think will bring a lot to the table. So I thank you for looking at bringing those two pieces together, those that are familiar with our area, as Tyndall Oliver is, as well as what Jared can bring to the table, is a real coup that we really, I'm very happy that you're bringing that forward. Thank you.
Councilman, just to recognize.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stewart, good stuff. I'm a little confused as to where this conversation is going, what's going to be our deliverable out of this discussion, if anything at all, and there may not be anything. But Ms. Shanahan kind of stole my thunder a little bit. Yeah, how much is this going to cost us to begin with? So I think I heard that this is going to be brought back to the Finance and Audit next meeting. Okay, so that we can discuss
in detail.
In detail. Okay, good. Because this can get out of hand really fast, real quickly. And as far as the timing of everything that has to happen, got to have the budget done. We're going to have all this done as part of the budget review and budget cycle. So I think that we need to plan it. The subcommittees can work it and bring it back to the entire board. But I do come back to all the discussions, come back to Mr. Smith. We gotta be careful what we say. We can say something inadvertent and cause ourselves a lot of heartburn that we don't need to do. And I do that very easily because I just get caught up in the discussion. So I'd like to come to some conclusion on where we are here and move forward because again, I'm not sure what we're going to be, what the end result of this discussion is going to be for today. So, but anyway, thank you.
Mr. Harden, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you. I think that it was a wise decision to at least pursue getting a quote to reopen the agreement with Tyndall Oliver. I know they just did the TDP update that was in conjunction with Mission Max, correct? So
correct.
We would assume that if staff negotiates it correctly, that it would be the thriftiest way to go. And then having Jared Walker answer to them under the agreement that they have with us seems like a wise way to engage the public. So I do look forward to seeing the quote. I think that that the Councilman Schisler and Kathleen are correct, Director Shanahan are correct, that we really do need to look at the deliverables, understand what we're getting. And I personally at that Finance and Audit Committee meeting, I'm going to be very interested in the nature of the public engagement, the numbers of them, where the outreach is going to take place, the hours of the day when that's going to take place, because I think that's going to be critically important to getting the public feedback we need back to Tyndall Oliver to get the TDP updated and get it all implemented, budget adopted by September. So thanks for your work on this.
Ms. Melendez, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hearing the words sole source and $400,000 in the same sentence is a little, kind of grates my ears a little bit as a consultant. I would say I definitely understand everyone's fervor for Mr. Walker, and he's very impressive. But I just, Jeff, I would just want to note for the record that that this, and I know you've only had it for 24 hours, but I take it that all CCNA rules and all procurement rules are going to be, double checked and rechecked, because I would not want this to come back on us, because that, so.
And if I may, again, we're bringing it forward for consideration and discussion. My report today was simply to say that I followed up on what I said we were going to do with getting it together. I will say that if we do go through, if the board chooses not to pursue this recommendation when it comes before the committee and the board in March, if we're looking at a normal outside procurement cycle, you're looking at not getting a consultant in this door until July or August. And we have a plan that needs to be put in place by September, let alone the out year planning. So this is an expedited, quick, we do not have time to sit around and wait to get this process moving. It's got to be now.
Yeah, I temper my comments with that understanding. I understand completely. Sense of urgency.
Okay. Mr. Mechanic.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we authorize Mr. Smith to pursue the interlocal agreement along the lines that he had outlined in his presentation.
Second. There's a motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Commissioner Overman, Sisler, and I think in Kemp. I think I got everyone in there. Any further discussion? Mr. Hart, you recommend?
Does pursue mean start to draft, or is that? I'm supportive of the motion.
Well, anything has to be brought back to this board, so I think I'm personally recommending we leave to his discretion the form that it takes, also knowing that he's got to negotiate this with the county and the other recipient agencies. So the product will come back to us and we'll make a determination at that time. But this is just to authorize him to pursue it.
I would understand that to include drafting, revising, negotiating.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it would be the full panoply of activities.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, the motion is adopted. Okay, we now move into approval of action items. 5A resolution R 2019-02-03. Mr. Seward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you today is the second extension of the MOU between HART and PSTA.
There's a motion by Ms. Shanahan, second by Councilman Suarez. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise, motion is adopted. B, resolution R 2019-02-04. Mr. Seward. I'm sorry, this is Scott Drenville.
Second.
I like this. There's a motion by Commissioner Shanahan, second by Councilman Suarez and Kemp to approve resolution 2019-02-04. See no further discussion. All those in favor? Hold on.
One question. Was this budgeted? We didn't have a meeting to discuss this. The expenditure for this CIT budgeted?
Correct.
For this year?
No, this was additional, these are additional grant funds that we had excess that weren't budgeted, and we are in desperate need of paratransit vans. So this allows us to be able to move forward with those purchases.
Thank you.
See no further discussion. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. We now move to interviews with the candidates for HART CEO position. Before I have Mr. Smith talk about the voting procedures and rules of deliberations, I'm going to ask Mr. Moser, our consultant, to come forth and say a few words, and then we'll move on from there.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody on the board. It's nice to be back here again, and I think if it's okay with you, I'll just take maybe a minute or two to just reflect on how we got to where we are today, so it's in the public record and prior to your bringing the interviews. But as I mentioned last week, we began the process back in September. I dialed in on a phone call, and the board ultimately voted to hold the recruitment process until after the tax vote had taken place, which was November 6th. So in the afternoon of November 6th, I posted the job. I talked about the places we posted that last week. And then I did an outreach and recruitment, a direct recruitment of candidates for about 60 days, or for 60 days. We closed that on January 6th. On January 7th, I was here. I shared resumes with you. We reviewed those resumes, and we ultimately decided to move forward with 4 candidates to conduct video presentations of. Those presentations were done over the next week. And on, I think, January 14th, the ad hoc committee reviewed those video presentations and decided to move 3 candidates forward. We did a little bit of logistics coordinating and scheduling of interviews. We had a meeting last week to obviously have a conversation about the process and whether or not it was appropriate to open the process back up to identify additional candidates, additional CEO candidates, or to move forward with our 3 candidates. And as you obviously remember, you as a group, as a board, voted 13-0 to move forward with the 3 candidates we had. Over the weekend, I got a call from one of our candidates, Mr. Ferguson, who decided to withdraw from the process. He sent a letter to me that I forwarded along to you for your review. And we still have 2 candidates left in the process. Both of them, one came in on Wednesday evening, one came in on Thursday. I believe everybody had a chance on the board to talk to them one-on-one, whether in person or in video or telephone conference. I know they're both very excited and very interested to be here today and are looking forward to speaking to you this morning. So with that, I'm back to you.
Any questions of Mr. Moser? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir. You should have a summary of the voting procedure before you, although you may choose to vary from that. Basically, it's contemplated that a vote would be determined by a ballot. You would choose which of the 2 candidates you prefer. At the end of that, of course, there would be a tally, and as long as there was a majority vote for one of the candidates, that person would be the one selected to negotiate with. Negotiations would commence. If they prove not to be successful, then the second candidate would move up to those negotiations. Alternatively, you can, if you prefer, simply have a raising of the hands vote. We don't have to go through the ballot process. Maybe that's something you can decide after you've heard from the candidates. But those are your options. We have the ballots prepared. You have them before you. But again, also you can consider raising of the hands if you'd prefer.
Any questions, Mr. Smith, before we move forward? Okay. We will have a presentation by each candidate for 5 minutes, and then we'll set aside 40 minutes for question and answers. Any questions on that, Mr.
Is it 40 minutes total for both candidates, or is it 40 minutes per candidate? That's what I
think it's 40 minutes per candidate.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Hopefully, we won't need 40 minutes per candidate because you've already had an opportunity
that would
to speak
be my suggestion too. But
you know, you've already had the opportunity to talk to them yesterday, and I hope we don't need 40 minutes per candidate. Any questions on the procedures? First candidate, Ms. Butler. Good morning. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me be here and share about myself. I'll start with the presentation, if that's all right, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. So I maybe don't know how to get this to display. Nope.
Here comes Lena.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, I'll sort of get started. So to talk about first 100 days to year 1 and year 5, and as I thought about this presentation and thought about this opportunity to serve this organization and lead, I really focused on what HART means to the riders, to the community. And I think what is interesting about transit is transit and HART means different things to different people. For some, there is experience with HART is a simple bus stop on the street. For some, it's the Marion Transit Center, some of the other super stops and transit centers throughout the community. For others, for many in the community who maybe are potential customers, not yet, their experience is a bus on the street. So I think it's important to always keep the customer in mind, or the potential customer, or just the community that we serve. So I start with this image here, and I know these seem a bit strange and different, but I wanted to think in terms of change and transformative change that happens in the community. So at one point in time, nurses smoked in hospitals. That's unheard of right now. When we began the interstate highway system, I know that's not a transit reference, but it's a huge transportation endeavor. It was unthinkable to think that we would have an interconnected network of highways and systems. And now we live in a world where if you don't have your phone in your pocket, really a major computer, you feel like you don't know what to do with yourself. So this transformative change can happen, and when we're at the end of it, it feels very good and everything is normal. But at the beginning, where we are now, it can feel anxiety, it's different, we don't know what's happening. So I just put that in your mind, that what seems unfathomable or unimaginable can be very comforting and familiar when it's all said and done. So first 100 days, I want to talk kind of in terms of triage. And I mean that in the nicest way that you can mean triage, but really looking at critical path items, key dates, what are the things that we need to do? You've had some discussion on those very critical items and things that need to move very, very quickly to meet deadlines, other regulatory requirements. So focusing on, but really number one is safety. I want to make sure from day one that I understand disaster recovery, emergency preparedness. When we put service out on the street every day, we are people's lives, we're caring for people's lives in our hands and on our bus. So that is very, very critical, and from day one, want to focus on that. Other pieces, key dates in the middle of negotiations, litigation, major procurements, talked a little bit about that already today. Legislative priority, getting ready for the state legislature session, and especially how all of those relate to the flow of funds, federal, local, state funds. Meet and greets with community and regional partners. That's going to be a whirlwind tour of meeting the community, having them get to know me, me getting to know them, and really starting that initial relationship with the community partners and customers. I put groundbreaking as a question mark. My last job, we had a groundbreaking 3 days after I started. Not sure if I can beat that record here, but maybe we can. Next, year one, really focusing on visible changes in the community, making sure that the support that we've seen from the community can be realized in tactical, tangible changes, whether it's service, whether it's improvements at bus stops, whether it is making clear that we are moving forward with plans and the transformative change that I think everybody in the community wants. Also, I would recommend now, sitting here, some refresh of the marketing and branding. I'm not saying a huge new changing the logo and all that, but really how do we talk about our customers? How do we communicate? And how are we presenting our image in the community that makes sense and shows people, hey, we're working, we're making these important changes for you and for the community. Mission Max, I'd love to see service 10 routes at 10 minutes. I know that's very dependent on fleet, it's very dependent on hiring drivers, but I think that is a great goal to have in that first year. And then also thinking about the internal assessment of the organization. How and why are we going to grow? I think asking why is critical in this. Why are we growing? What do we need to do to accomplish to make this happen for the community? Year 5, HART is trending. Back in the day, I might have said we were making above the fold headlines, but really some audacious goals. What if Tampa and the Hillsborough region became the first city to break the top 25 of world's most livable cities? I think that would be amazing. Hillsborough County lands the next insert tech company here, and then just winning innovation awards and autonomous oriented development. So I'll leave you with this moving forward on building on this community support for HART, enhancing and engaging the organization, leading to the transformative change for the community. All right?
Thank you, Ms. Butler. I'll start off with the first question, if you don't mind. Understand the availability of the new sales tax revenue to appropriate and spend will not exist till at least January 2020. How will you manage the expectations of the board, the community, and the HART staff when assuming a budget which is already constrained with little to no additional funds to start your tenure?
That is just going to be clear and transparent communication with the members of the community and the board. There's business that's need to continue to happen, buying buses, hiring drivers, putting service out on the street. I've spent a good bit of my career trying to make ends meet, as HART and the staff have done here as well for many years. So that piece would be very familiar to me. But I think that the parts that I have been able to gather in my very brief time here is the first thing that needs to happen is really a coalescing and finding the common ground of this community, this board, the staff, the organization, and certainly the customers in the community. So putting together that vision of where we want to go, where we want to take the community would be top of mind.
Okay. Any questions, Ms. Butler? Any questions? Mr. Melendez, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Butler, for coming and speaking, and thanks for the time last night during our interview. Finances and money we've been talking about it a lot today, but one of the things that I expressed in our early discussions about this position was the humanity aspect of the position and people. And having served on the board for, it's been 7 years now, I've gotten to meet operators. I've gotten to meet, people at every level. So for me personally, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot, but I'll ask the same question of your, of the other applicant. If you were to get the position, would you commit today to not making any broad sweeping kind of changes with regard to personnel as you evaluate them, such as, making everyone reapply for their job? I know that's a very direct question. If you're not comfortable answering it, you don't have to, but in my opinion, maintaining morale and the momentum that we have, that I've seen at HART over the 7 years is going to be important. In other words, do you know what I'm saying? Like coming in and just flipping things on its head, I wouldn't want that. So are you comfortable addressing that question?
I shared with you, and I think a couple others, I have worked over the course of my career with people who have worked at a transit agency for 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. And there is a lot of value in people that have knowledge and care for the community and for the organization. So I think of that in terms of how to build a team that is diverse and engaged and is accountable. So I would not, and I certainly have met very few people, I know there's staff here that I hope to have the pleasure to meet and work with, but I would not intend to make any major sweeping changes. And I really do think that you can build a team and find value in how people want to contribute. Maybe people do things a little differently and maybe there's some restructuring, but I wouldn't envision any kind of wholesale change because I really have seen the value in having maybe people that come from a different industry or maybe people that are new to the workforce, matching that with people who really bring that knowledge and experience in transit.
Thank you.
Ms. Suarez, recognized. Councilman Suarez.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for being here. We had a wonderful meeting yesterday. I liked the way you think and some of the ideas that you had. And I like the fact that one of the first things you talk about is safety and risk management. Since I'm in the insurance industry, it's always nice to see it start up first and not last. Obviously, we're going to go through a lot of changes. Regardless of what happens with the particular case that's before us, it's going to be a new agency for you. If we do ultimately win this case and we have all these dollars, what kind of vision do you see for HART as we go forward to provide effective and efficient transportation for all the people in Hillsborough County?
Sure. Without being too sort of specific from a service delivery standpoint,
sure.
And I am a firm believer in we need to know what our customers want. We need to know what the community wants. But if I can venture a guess as to sort of how people feel about transit or how they feel about transportation, one thing that is clear is we have to be more competitive, certainly from a time standpoint. You have to make the service more reasonable or faster, better than how people travel now. And the way that you see the industry going is moving towards really mobility as a service or a suite of services so that you have a seamless interaction so that if somebody wants to take a bike or use a scooter or walk and then take a bus line and then maybe hop on something else, that it's sort of one seamless transition. So I think that's a key piece of the vision that I'm making some assumptions about what people want based on my experience. And then making sure that we have a very equitable service in the community so that people understand why we put the service where we put it, the reasons behind it, why the service is structured the way that is. And that takes, that takes work. That takes communication and building relationships and working with staff and other community partners to make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Shanahan, you recognize.
Nice to meet you in person, and I appreciated our ability to catch up earlier this week. One of the, I think one of the challenges / ongoing opportunities, I would say, is our negotiation with our contract union members. And it was interesting. I was at an event recently where it was the DuPont Awards for Journalism in New York, and there was a special that was done about bus drivers, and the people that put this on won the award. And it talked about the vulnerability and the accessibility and really the struggle that, a lot of things that they get exposed to in a shift or a cycle. I think one of the challenges, just from sitting on the board and hearing challenges of some of the distinct communities that use the buses or the vans in terms of service delivery, I've seen grow in a negative way, not get resolved in a positive way. So I'm just curious about your familiarity, comfortability in terms of both negotiating with unions, which I think is one slice of the opportunity, but I also think building a relationship with the union participants is another key essential for us as we go forward in a very constructive way. And I'd just like to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I think bus drivers have one of the most extraordinary jobs out there. I think what they do is amazing, and I remind our drivers at Lextran that every day is you change people's lives every single day. So I really commend them, and it can be challenging. The world is changing at its fast pace, and there are challenges that bus drivers face that you may not have the same experience at different jobs and different professions. So in my time at Lextran, and certainly working at other transit agencies, working with a union shop or a union environment, we've done two union contracts, and I've had 3 different union presidents. So building the relationship is really a key part, because you have your time where you're at the bargaining table, and then you have the rest of the time in between the contract. And that's really where a lot of the work gets done, is the time in between the negotiations. So one project or endeavor was this recent contract negotiation led to the formation of a joint labor management committee. We have a facilitator that comes in, so it's very, very different, and it's intended to be very different than a bargaining where you're one side and the other and you share proposals and go back and forth. So we don't talk about any contractual items as part of this labor management committee, but it's been a very different format and a very rewarding one, where we've been able to really understand each other, the two sides, and understand the organization a little bit better. So it's been a positive. I don't know what my union president would say about me at a meeting, but I certainly have enjoyed the experience in working with the union.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Sisley, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Butler, it was very nice to meet you last evening. Thank you for the indulging the hour that we met. I do have 2 real quick questions. One is one we did not discuss last night, and that was what your experience with performance measures and key indicators and things like your ability to create them and to live by them. You know, if it can't be measured, if it can be measured, it can be improved upon, type of thing. And we as a board are not in the buses and so forth, so we have to rely upon these as indicators. Your experience, and what's your experience been in creating these?
Sure. So I have started a number, especially coming from a background in planning, that outcome, goal, objective, key performance indicator is certainly something that I'm kind of a nerd about, I guess. So we've worked on different, tying the key performance indicators to staff goals and objectives, so that there's a clear link between what the larger vision is and some of the more specific metrics. What I see now is very exciting, is how much data you can generate and what that data can mean for the performance metrics. So one that I find a great little data point is how many people are late when you have a low on-time performance, or where you're struggling with on-time performance. Because if you have one bus that's 15 minutes late, but there's only 1 or 2 people on it, that's not the same as having 10 buses that are 7 minutes late, but that impacts hundreds more people. So I'm not a big data analyst personally, but I see some of the really benefits of having a team or a staff that can work through some of that big data analytics and really get into the finer grain of performance and how your service and your product is operating out on the street.
My second thank you. My second question, and it's one we discussed last night, but I wanted to ask the same question in front of the open session, so that the other board members had a chance to hear your answer. Given the time frame which with this job the posting has evolved with, the final posting or final request for applications did not go out until the vote was taken and we knew how the citizens had voted regarding the referendum. And my question to you last night was, and I hope for your same answers, would you have sought the job had the resolution or the referendum failed?
I would have, and you know, it makes it a much more exciting opportunity to know that there is this transformative change that can happen, assuming litigation and everything goes according to how the organization wants it. But it's still a time for change and transformation. I think money makes, additional funding and a flow of funds can make things happen much, much faster at a much quicker pace. But my advice and my counsel to this board and this organization is, don't let money always be the driving factor. I mean, sometimes there's a practical, you can't order buses if you don't have the funds to pay for them. But as far as the vision and how you want to serve the community and things you want to do, money can't be the only factor in making that. So I still see this as a very exciting time for the organization, and I would love the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
We talked a little bit last evening, and thank you very much for meeting with me, about your management style. I think it's critically important not only in how you work with your employees and measure the growth that we do anticipate, but also how you work with the public in terms of communicating. And sort of get back to Ms. Shanahan's question. How do you communicate what our mission is and manage those expectations is important. If we get to a place where we are able to feel comfortable with the resources we see coming, there's going to be a massive increase in the number of people you're going to have to manage. Not only on our bus drivers, you know, as you know, are in a situation where they're our front line, but also in the maintenance yard. And we're looking at multiple technologies. Your experience in multiple sources of ways to get around is valuable. Can you elaborate a little bit about what your style looks like, what your measurement will be in terms of improving or increasing the workforce, and then ultimately how you would incorporate that in the overall structure of the organization?
So as you know, the budget for an organization, a transit organization, transit agency, is very much based in it's a labor-driven budget. So the largest share is typically your wages and fringe benefits for bus drivers, maintenance technicians, the staff. So that is driven really from the amount of service that you have out in the community. So we have two things that we're sort of working with at the same time is, what's the plan? How much service? How are we going to grow? Where are we going to grow? What is the staff needs? That's then going to feed into the budget. So, but how I would see the sort of management of that and how you want to be able to maintain the level of customer service and what people are providing on that front line is really to make sure that the bus drivers or the maintenance technicians or the other maintenance employees have a clear feel for the organization and the priorities. So that can be done in any number of ways, whether it's a meet and greet with the CEO, more structured sort of mini departments within the larger departments. So you're a group of 10 or 12 bus drivers and you have a supervisor that helps to disseminate information to you. Toolbox talks and on the shop floor where people are every day given more information about what's going on, or safety, risk management, other specific things.
Thank you.
Ms. Bubbles, thank you so much for our opportunity to meet on Monday. I love your subtle inference on where we were and where we are today and how technology played a key role in that. From my standpoint, thank you. We were able to FaceTime one another on Monday, so I think that was a good way for us to connect and see a lot more about you and where you were, how you interact in your environment. And so to that point, thank you so much for that. I'm a firm believer of good work is reinforced, good behaviors are reinforced, and I'd like to understand how you recognize good work.
Generally, so
at all levels.
Okay, sure. I agree. I think making people feel valued and appreciated is critical in the workplace, and it maybe doesn't happen enough in all places. So making sure that people understand the value that they bring and making them feel rewarded for the work and job well done, I think just sort of generally as you go about your day is important. I do like a structured rewards and employee engagement program. You can do there are some software applications where you can be giving people points or sort of rewards. There's an insurance program, Humana Vitality, that is sort of like that. So I do like a structured place that people can feel a tactical reward for a job well done. And, celebrating things. I think making sure that you have the opportunity to gather and celebrate and pat each other on the back and understand that, we're here to work as a team and we do a good job and serve the community. I think that's important as well.
Thanks. As a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, what plans do you have in place currently in your role that, as it relates to your rewards and recognition program for your employees?
We have just entered into a contract with a firm called Terryberry. They have a Give a Wow program. I've worked on other, like a bus box program where you've got dollars to collect and then buy programs. But what I like about this particular program that we have purchased, and I'm not making any formal endorsement, that's who we went with, the contract that we went with, but they have the kind of points and you can collect things and get prizes. You purchase things that meet what you're interested in rather than a gift card or a $5 cash. They have a social media type platform where I recognize you, I give you a high five or give a wow. So between the staff and employees, they can also be recognizing each other too in that way.
Thank you. I believe our employees at HART are going to be our biggest advocates and advertisers, so I want to make sure that we have intense focus on their ability to say good things and feel valued as you come aboard if you're selected for the position.
You know what? I'm sorry, you just reminded me of one other thing. I do a handwritten note to employees on their seniority date, and then we do handwritten thank you cards if we get a specific commendation from a customer.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
Yes, thank you again for our meeting last night and for coming today. You've heard some discussion earlier about public outreach, and I think given the referendum, we recognize a need for an extraordinary effort in that regard. Can you tell me what your role, you see your role as the CEO of the organization in that public outreach, and perhaps you could provide some examples of some successful endeavors you've used in the context of public outreach? Sure.
I see the public outreach here in two parts. There is the broad public outreach relationship building, meeting with the community that is ongoing and will happen at all levels of the organization, including the bus drivers and frontline staff who talk to the community every single day. Then I see more of maybe project-specific or program-specific outreach. And a style of meeting that I find very helpful for the organization and for the community is more of an open house format where it's not just about, sort of coming up to the podium and making a statement and then the next person goes. Well, we've all been to meetings that have that format, but an open house where if there is a particular topic, maybe it's done by route, maybe it's done by neighborhood, where people can go and speak and have a conversation with the staff member about what is being proposed or what is being talked about. And if you look at sort of the feedback that you get from community or constituents over that, I think people find that sort of more open house, more of conversational format a lot more rewarding for them so that they can get a better understanding of what you're trying to do. And quite frankly, that we can get a better understanding of what their needs are and what they would like to see.
Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Okay.
Good morning. And yesterday, I really appreciate your input and also sharing. And time went by real fast, but thank you for everything. One of the things I wanted to ask, like, will you have like a, and we talked about safety, we talked about even the negotiation with the union and also with the, you know, administration not coming in with a wholesale change, and you said that you would be open for that. Like having a listening tour with the drivers, the staff, and see what the needs and the concerns, and how did you increase the revenue? You know, we talked about from 400,000 to 2 million. If you can hit on that some and some of the ideas, and we also talked about, you know, like we have like the 21st Street, I talked to you about 21st Avenue and the hub downtown, about the way Tampa is growing, that you could perhaps have other hubs, satellite places where we can work on efficiency and do things better. So if you can touch on those areas some.
Sure. So the interaction with employees is key, and I like that to be structured both formally and informally. Maybe there's a kind of coffee, donuts, more of a casual conversation with employees, but then having more of a structured presentation to groups of employees. Maybe it's done when they're getting an annual training so that they understand the budget, where major projects in the next year. So I think that's important to establish those relationships. And it can't just be with the CEO. It has to be with the different directors and managers, you know, supervisors on down, that you have to keep that engaged workforce, you know, so that people feel accountable and excited about the work they're doing. The second piece you brought up was our partnership, LexTrans partnership with the University of Kentucky, and we've grown that program since I've been there, making sure that the cost that was associated with that service on campus was more commensurate what we were getting back, so that we were not necessarily losing money on the project. So we did that by working on marketing program, outreach to the students, faculty, and staff, changing a fare program so their University of Kentucky ID works as good as a transit pass, and then doing some restructuring on service, and did that in a proposal-based format, multi-year, with some additional sort of riders in the contract where if they wanted additional service, it came in at a slightly higher rate. So very proud of our team for the work that we did on that, and University of Kentucky is a big partner in our community, and it really acts as a secondary downtown because of the amount of people that go there every day. And then the third piece we talked about was the maintenance hub and how HART will grow over time. And as you see in larger organizations, different garages, different operating facilities, and how to make that work with the community. If some of it can be spatially driven. You can only do so much in a certain acreage. But the other piece that you want to look for is ways to be effective and cost effective with the service delivery. So if you have a secondary location, maybe you're dispatching out of that garage, and then you can get some efficiencies from service as well.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you, and I appreciate your being available for all of us to talk with you. That must have been quite an experience of all these interviews one-on-one, but I got a lot out of our interview, and I appreciate that. I was very interested in the answers to Mr. Mechanick's questions about public communication, and you and I talked extensively about that last night. I'm also interested in hearing, which we didn't talk about, your communication, your policies and philosophy about communications with this board, and any experience in that regard, and keeping us informed as board members, not just in these monthly meetings, but outside of this format in terms of what's going on. And also I'm looking for some discussion of your experiences, honest communication with your board members and the public, giving us all the benefit of your experience and expertise. Let the chips fall where they may, regardless of what you might think we want to hear, letting us fully benefit from your professional experience. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. It's critical in a governmental public service role that we're honest and transparent in our communication. Nothing good happens if we try to, dodge or shy away from things. So that's a a personal philosophy I have that is critical for public service. You get some tough questions though, and sometimes either whether it's timing or where things are in the process, it can be hard to give a full picture at times. So that can be tough. I mean, making sure that people respect the communications and trust what people are saying is critical. But I really sincerely believe that is what you must do as a public organization. And that extends on down the line to employees and throughout the organization. There's things that change an organization that people are not happy about. And what I found is it's better to communicate early, to communicate often, and make sure that people understand why it's happening. That can be important. As far as communications with the board, yes, there's the very formal, the meeting format, the board packet, and Jeff shared a little bit about the meetings and kind of structure of how he's communicated with the board over time. I think there are, maybe there's an informal update, in-person communications, and I would certainly want to know more of what works for the individual board members, of what their style is and what their preferences are.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. I'd like to know why you believe that you'd be a good fit to lead the organization, to be our CEO at HART at this time.
Sure. Two things. Right now, the pressure is on to move as quickly as we can as an organization, given the constraints and litigation. And that is something I feel particularly strong at. In my current role at Lextran, we started off and hit the ground running. New headquarters project, different fuel types in the middle of a contract negotiation. So some of what we're talking about here feels very familiar to me, and I guess I'm maybe a glutton for punishment and just like to have a lot of things going on at one time. I think the other piece that I feel confident or strongly about is my ability to find common ground between different parties and different people, and really, listen to what people are saying, and maybe listen for what they're not saying, but what they're maybe really feeling or thinking. And I think that is needed here at this time.
You have another question?
If I could.
Go ahead.
I'd like to know, there's been a lot of discussion on this board about transit-oriented development, about the kinds of things that come forward and somehow trying to bring transit and those other, that other vision together with land use. What experience do you have, or what could you bring to the table with regards to that?
Well, I don't know that HART can do that alone. The transit-oriented development, in its very strictest definition, would be structures that the transit agency builds, and joint development can bring in revenue. But that's one piece of it. But you really want to think about how the land use or the built environment, where residents, where jobs are located, and how transit works with those. Because in some ways, everything could be transit-oriented development. So it's something that the partnerships and working with the community, the development community, your land use planners locally, that sort of zoning and land use side is key to make the transit-oriented development, whether it's a specific project for HART, but also for how HART operates in the community and region.
Okay, our 40 minutes time period has come to an end. Ms. Butler, we appreciate you being here. Appreciate you answering questions. I know you're you're kind of glad to be down here because I just looked at Lexington, Kentucky. It's 36 degrees.
Definitely. The timing was fine. I appreciate that. So thank you for scheduling this week. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Mr. Limmer, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Miller, members of the board. Thank you for having me here today.
Okay. You have 5 minutes to make a presentation, and then the board will have 40 minutes to answer any questions that they may have. So the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. Thank you once again for having me here today. Sorry, as I get situated. So as you could see here, I have the proven experience in transforming multimodal transit agencies throughout the U.S. I have the professional experience that has really allowed me to excel in the public transportation field as a whole. In summary, really, my career has very uniquely positioned me for this role and to lead HART. Quite honestly, I was built for this job. I'm eager to share with you today that if I'm hired as HART's next CEO, what my 100-day, 1-year, and 5-year vision for HART would be. I do see my first 100 days broken into 3 phases: discover, plan, and execute. So if I may, let me take a look at the first 30 days. Really, the foundation of my vision is to create an overall culture of excellence. I would hold one-on-one meetings with key internal and external stakeholders. I'd also begin an agency-wide listening tour to hear from all of our employees. I would conduct a very in-depth review of the key performance measurements. I'd also build an in-depth understanding of HART's current services that it offers, as well as the plans that are on the table, and start to understand the collective bargaining process as well. I would begin developing action plans to really maximize the impact of the new sales tax revenues, but I would be focused on procuring vehicles, advancing the collective bargaining, the recruiting, hiring, and training of bus operators, as well as mechanics. And then I would also look for leveraging opportunities for some of your larger high-capacity transit projects. Phase 2 of my 100 days would be focused on our plan. I'd reinforce the culture of excellence and prepare for the overall transformation of HART. I'd continue meetings with the senior management teams as well as the individual business units here at HART. This would include an organizational and staff assessment to get the right people in the right role with the right focus. The goal would be to get the organization structured and staffed to build successful projects and, of course, provide top-notch, top-quality customer service going forward. I would also continue stakeholder meetings, consensus building, initiate community listening tours, and begin the whole engagement process with the county's new independent oversight committee. Next, I would establish 2 specific task forces, one in the area of workforce and then the other in the area of technology. And these 2 task forces would be designed in a way to really position HART for our future. Communication of progress to the board is going to be critical and will continue and include a review of the results completed share the overall insights that I've learned, and align with the board priorities and overall vision for growth. This would also include the approach to strategic planning and an action plan to accelerate delivery of the sales tax program. Phase 3 of my 100 days would culminate with execution. I would review the results again with the board, present a strategic plan for complete transformation of HART, driven by the factors shown here on this slide. Rebranding, prioritization, building talent, innovation, partnerships are really key to meet all of the needs of the citizens of our county. Upon concurrence from the board, we will execute the plan by championing this new culture of excellence and prepare for our full transformation. I would lead organizational change management. Simply put, organizing to drive success. I continue to foster and build stakeholder relationships and partnerships and would fully integrate myself into the community and invest in the overall county's success going forward. The one-year plan would include new priority services that are open and operational. Our culture of excellence and priorities are fully embraced by all the employees that are highly functioning, all with a cohesive senior management team helping me lead HART.
Mr. Clemmer, give you one more minute to wrap up.
Yep. HART would be strong financially and would also continue the strong partnerships. So lastly, the 5-year plan would focus on the priority bus routes, the extension of the streetcar, and would focus on the high priority fixed guideway transit solutions. Year 5 would also position HART to be a national leader in workforce training, boasting the lowest turnover rate and a leader in technology and recognized as a world-class organization. So in closing, why me? Again, I was built for this job. The characteristics and talents listed on the slide made me the right person to be your CEO. And the outcomes I would build upon are listed here as well. But in addition to be your next CEO, I would also be your Chief Transformation Officer to lead HART into the future and become a world-class transit agency. I thank you for your time. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Member. I will start off with the first question, and then the other members will ask their questions. Understand that the availability of new sales tax revenue to appropriate and spend will not be in existence to at least January 2020. How will you manage the expectations of the board, the community, and the HART staff on assuming a budget which is already constrained with little to no additional funds to start your team?
Yeah, so it absolutely starts with communication internally, externally. I spoke about that in the overall vision. Ensuring that the vision is cohesive and you're able to communicate it internally and externally to stakeholders. Of course, I'd have frequent interaction and communication with the board about exactly how the overall implementation and rollout of the new transit services in the near term, as well as preparing for some of the longer term high capacity transit projects would be set forth going forward. So.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Melinda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Melinda, thank you for coming, and it was a pleasure talking with you last night as well. Appreciate the presentation, very detailed, and I definitely appreciate the thought you've given into you know, if you were to achieve the position, you know, what that might look like. Thank you for that. My question focuses, and we talked a little bit about this last night, on people. You know, we have, and I think I mentioned, you know, we're going to have these, we'll call them shiny objects, you know, and all these folks that want to, you know, there's just going to be a lot of pressure coming in to you know, to use this money wisely, et cetera. I could go on. But I want to talk about people, specifically the people at HART. Been on the board for a while, and I've really grown to appreciate the culture that currently exists. And really, I would say it's the spirit of the folks that work here, you know, whether it's an operator, whether it's staff here in this building. And my question to you is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, so, you know, if you don't want to answer that, I completely understand, but your approach to staff and coming in and transforming, would you be prepared today to say that you're, as part of your toolbox, you know, something as extreme as doing kind of a broad, you know, you have to reapply for your position? Is that a potential option as part of your plan, or would you take more of kind of I'll call it a more balanced approach, for lack of a better word, or not to put words in your mouth, if you want to characterize, what your approach to that would be. And I say that with the people in mind, the livelihoods and the folks that, that are here in Tampa. Thank you.
Sure. Fantastic question. At the previous transit agencies that I've worked at, they've been focused on these major projects, expansion mode, kind of transforming themselves. It's really important not to lose who you are in the whole process, and take care of the variety of staff that you have to make sure that you do maintain humanity throughout that hyper growth period. I hope you saw in my 100-day, 1-year plan, and even 5-year plan what I intend to do, which is a lot of listening. I really want to figure out what HART is doing well today, review the resources that has been able to be highly successful today. But also there will be a transformation of HART. So we will have expanded roles, expanded services throughout the county. So really ensuring, again, that you get the right people in the right place with the right focus going forward. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think it does, and it reinforces what you said last night, and that is listening. To me, that doesn't necessarily include, all right, everybody, we're going to do this broad, imposition of, some approach. I mean, it sounds like it's more of, I hate to use the word finesse, but, listening involves sometimes finesse or savvy and accounting for what you're hearing, as opposed to just dictating, hey, all right, it's a new day here, type of a thing. So, yeah, you did answer my question. Thank you.
Ms. Shanahan, recognized.
Good morning, and thank you again for your interest in this position. I'd be curious if you could spend a couple of minutes just on on your capital project experience and the size of P&Ls that you have managed in your prior locations, just to give a flavor of that for the record. Thanks.
Sure, I'll start with the most recent, kind of work my way backwards. Currently at MARTA's, the core bus and rail services are funded through a 1-cent sales tax in 3 counties, or in 2 counties. Within the last 5 years, though, there's been 2 sales tax referendums passed. There's been a sales tax referendum within the city limits, and then one in Clayton County to the south. Those 2 programs put together are about $10 billion over 40 years. So a lot of those near-term projects, specifically bus services and facilities, including, bus shelters and comfortable places to wait for the bus service, those are all out on the street today. Each of those communities desire some type of high-capacity transit solution. Bus rapid transit projects, the commuter rail, a 22-mile light rail project in the city, as well as also similar to here, a modernization of the downtown streetcar. So that's really my purview experience, is helping getting those projects off the ground. Building a consensus both inside MARTA, outside MARTA, to really propel both of those programs forward. The voters have very high expectations. There's a lot of thirst in the metropolitan area to expand MARTA, so that's really been my focus there. As far as the Phoenix program is concerned, when I started at Phoenix, it was about a $9 billion expansion program to build what was then a 60-mile light rail network throughout the valley. It also had rapid expansion of express bus and local bus service to support those light rail projects. And then there was about a 3-mile streetcar within the city of Tempe. Overall, again, $9 billion. We did go through a recession or two, but really the foundation of that program was that 60-mile light rail network. And my job, again, was to take the projects really from, call it birth, and then shepherd them through all the way to securing the capital investment grant through the federal government. And then prior to that, really where I cut my teeth on capital projects and programs was, I had the wonderful opportunity to work on the Euclid Avenue Bus Rapid Transit project in Cleveland, Ohio, which is now known as the Health Line. That was the first significant expansion of transit in Cleveland in a couple of decades. And so my role there was really focused on planning, community engagement, getting stakeholder buy-in on that critical transformational project for Cleveland as well.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Sisley, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Limerick, and thank you for the meeting last night. I appreciate the effort and your answers. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Butler. And basically, the two questions. The first one is dealing with metrics and key performance indicators. What's your experience in developing them with what you've seen? What might you bring in? What's an important KPI? What's a performance metric that you would like to see that would help us to improve, to understand what's going on with the system and how we can improve it?
Sure. MARTA is the 8th largest transit system in the United States. I oversee 6 offices within MARTA. One of those offices is the Office of Research and Analysis, and that is their job. Their job is to collect data, ridership data, on-time performance data, mean distance between failures data, and all of the above. And they do survey work, both electronic and kind of interface survey work to really collect data both internally and then directly from our customers. So I'm a big data oriented type of leader. Again, that's one of the offices that I oversee at MARTA, and then we do quarterly updates to the board to let them know about the sustainability of their transit agency. Also, safety reporting is a huge element of what we look at and collect, as well as report to the board there. So I actually did my key performance indicators report yesterday back in Georgia. So I have a lot of experience with analyzing data by overseeing that office at MARTA. And throughout my career, I've always been a statistics type leader, whether it's managing the planning development program in Phoenix, as well as when I was working as a planner in Ohio as well. So critical part of going forward. Again, I listed kind of the primary key performance indicators that I would be looking at. There's certainly, for example, with all of the trends going on in ridership and all of the new players to the mobility field, ridership patterns have been a little unique lately. So I'm also have a lot of experience really digging deep into the data to find out what's going on. Are we losing riders in the peak periods? Are we losing riders during Saturdays? Are we gaining riders during the middle of the day and late night? So those are some of the things that I would certainly bring to the table here.
Good, thank you. Switching gears just a little bit, same question as we spoke last night. Given the timetable with which the opportunity arose and the fact that we didn't really procure applications till after the sales tax initiative had passed, had the initiative not passed, would you still have applied for the position?
I would answer that question this way, is that, I was watching with intent the sales tax referendum program that was happening here, and I was analyzing both the plans that were on the table as well as the overall, call it media coverage, that shared some of the thoughts from the community and customers that ride HART today, as well as the citizens of the county. The tax did pass. It meant that HART was going to be charged with implementing, multiple services over several decades, and that certainly piqued my interest because it very much aligned with my background. Since I've worked on these expansion programs throughout my career, I thought it was a fantastic fit for me, and I thought I was a fantastic fit for where you all were going into the future. The tax did pass, and so that has been my focus of what I've been reviewing since the first week of November.
Thank you.
Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Okay. And again, good morning. Thanks for yesterday meeting with you and going over some of the things. Again, we talked about management, personnel, the drivers, operators, and everything. You say you would be open to going around with a listening tour and see what, and staff and the negotiation also pointed on that we're in the process of with the administration and the garage, expansion and everything we do. But also talked on about how you felt about hubs in different areas, satellite areas and everything. If you can touch on that with some of the experience from other things you've been through, how you feel about that and, and learning some of our real needs and, working together. And even partnership with, with you got the trains, you got the rail, you got the bus, with all the other things like partnering. Can you touch on that a little?
Certainly. Absolutely. Especially in my experience and time in Phoenix, as well as my time in Georgia, both of those cities really were expanding rapidly and building out their transit system to align with their current and projected population and employment patterns going forward. That was a big reason why all of those sales tax programs were passed. A critical component and sometimes overlooked piece of those expansion programs is the transit infrastructure that it takes to support all of that additional bus service and or rail service. So in Phoenix, there was the development of, call them sub-regional operations and maintenance facility for the bus services, as well as there was the overall development of an operations and maintenance facility for the light rail system. That facility was actually built with the intent of being able to have the capacity to service about half of the 60 miles that I spoke about earlier as far as that light rail plan. In Atlanta, we're doing a couple of things. One, we do have a couple of garages, one in particular that is reaching the end of its useful life, and you couple that with the passage of the Clayton County sales tax. So we're looking at an opportunity now to open up a new operations and maintenance facility in North Clayton County, and then we would decommission that garage that is reaching the end of its useful life. And then we are also have a sales tax referendum coming up this spring in Gwinnett County for an opportunity for that county to join MARTA, that's northeast of our current service area. We'll also be looking at opening an operations and maintenance facility there. So the support facilities are a critical component of providing new bus service, expanded bus service throughout a service area. And that does include working with the local communities to attract, recruit, retain those specialized bus operators, rail operators, mechanics, and other supervisional staff as well to help, again, support those new services.
Ms. Williams, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Limmer, for meeting with me on Monday. I certainly appreciate the time we spent together and the specificity of this plan that you presented today. I'm curious, with your background and your in-depth knowledge and your proven leadership, what are the 3 measures of success that we can validate as a board within the first 100 days?
Yeah, certainly. I go back to, I always look at the 3 measures of success, especially with organizations like I've had the pleasure of serving with, and where I see HART transforming into the future are the elements that I outlined in my video interview. Certainly the key to success is having exceptional fiscal discipline. That's with our current resources and the resources that we project to receive over time. And these are in no particular order. Creating an overall employer of choice I want everyone to be proud to work at HART, want to come to work every day, and really to provide the surrounding environment that really creates a positive culture and the overall culture of excellence. And then the last is operational excellence, making sure that all of our services are safe, they're clean, they're well maintained, they are on time, and that they are that folks can really rely on them to get them to live, work, and play throughout the county. So those are really the elements that I see as critical to the success of HART going forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. We've been having a lot of discussion. We started a transit-oriented development committee. I hear a lot of discussion in the community vis-a-vis, and it's a great concern of mine, land use and transit, how they work together, whether that be called transit-oriented development or affordable housing opportunities by transit. I'm just wondering what you would bring to the table and your thoughts in terms of that.
Absolutely, hugely critical. I actually started out my career in Cleveland as the transit-oriented development lead for the RTA in Cleveland. My job there was to really launch the TOD program there, where we both looked at our existing assets and then focused on development opportunities for the future. We also worked very closely with local jurisdictions to create transit supportive land use policies, economic incentive ideas, programs, things of that nature. Did something very similar in Arizona, although in Arizona, since it was a brand new light rail system, a lot of that was proactive land use planning to ensure that we were really thinking off the rails just a little bit and outside of the bus, up on the curbs, to really create a surrounding environment to where transit can be successful. Phoenix is historically an automobile-centric city, as is Atlanta. So those land use planning, development, TOD, was hugely critical to that success as well. And when I left Arizona, they had seen a little over $7 billion of economic activity around their station areas. And then in Atlanta, a lot of it was retrofitting MARTA's land assets that surrounded their heavy rail stations. Many of those were underutilized park and ride lots, but MARTA also is a very significant landholder in the 3 counties that it serves. So as I started at MARTA, we ramped up our TOD development program. It has now produced 4 mixed-use and/or office development projects on our land. We're entertaining a couple of additional opportunities right now to further develop and enhance our land use surrounding our stations. But transit agencies, now and in the future, they need to work very closely with local jurisdictions, neighborhoods, and stakeholders to really make sure that the asset of the transit operation is being maximized by partnering with surrounding land use development opportunities to really maximize its success going forward.
Mr. Mechanic, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you again for meeting last night. And with the referendum having passed, I think we've all discussed the fact that public outreach is going to be critical. I'd like you to comment both on what you see your role in the community outreach arena is, and what experiences you've had that you would bring to bear here in Tampa.
Sure. My experiences to date, I mean, the keys to success of the expansion programs and even providing efficient, well-run existing services is engaging with your community on an ongoing basis. In Atlanta, we frequently review our existing transit services, and that includes our facilities and bus stops. With the community, both in public hearings, we go to events where people are located. We have a MARTA accessibility committee, so I review all of our services with the Metropolitan Accessibility Committee. And so that's key to make sure your existing services are best meeting the needs of your riding public. Also, when you're developing the sales tax program, after, say, the financial program, ensuring that you have community buy-in, that you're communicating frequently with the community and the stakeholders, setting appropriate expectations about what you can do, how, what do these new services mean, and when can the riding public expect to see them is also absolutely critical. And that's been true in Atlanta, in Phoenix, and of course, part of my job in Cleveland was to ensure that there was community buy-in around the bus rapid transit. So I sort of have traveled through the public transit industry with community outreach is really the foundation and the backbone of how I operate. And as your next CEO, that would be an absolutely critical component to maintain that, to really embed and integrate not only myself, but the senior management team and the team responsible for expanding bus service throughout Hillsborough County to make sure that HART is at all of those tables, that HART is listening, and that HART is rolling out plans for the future that aligns with those community and customer desires.
Thank you.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you. Thank you very much for applying for this position. It's been a pleasure to work, talking with you and learning about your expertise, and clearly you have a diverse background that prepares you very well for this position. Some questions that we talked a little bit about last night and were made earlier is your management style when it comes to probably the largest expense of any transit industry. That's our workforce. How would you describe your relationship with your workforce as well as the unions, at your current location, and what would you do to either enhance or improve that relationship if that's, an option?
Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic question. I'm a situational leader. I believe in building a very successful team, not only at the senior management level to propel us forward, but ensuring that they have the resources and that they're clear of what the individual goals are, as well as the overall vision and mission of the organization going forward. I've had the tremendously fortunate experience to work, at different types of transit agencies across the country. I can be, hands-on when warranted. I can lead by example, but really I can also delegate very well. But it all comes down to the team that you build, and then providing leadership and really empowering them to lead their individual efforts as well for the overall benefit of HART, as well as the transit agencies that I've worked for. I'm very much a collaborator, a listener. I listen first. Maybe it's the planning background, but I do a lot of collaboration. I gather a lot of input, and I use those, when time allows. Sometimes you have to make decisions that do not allow you enough time to really fully collaborate and gather as much information as possible. But traditionally, that's been my style, very collaborative in nature. Throughout my 100-day plan, a critical component was to do a lot of listening and to really engage the staff to figure out, are there things we should keep doing, start doing, stop doing, those types of things. So, critical.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. I very much enjoyed our interview last night, and we covered a broad range of topics. And one of the things you mentioned that we didn't get to talk a lot about was a range of transit options that could be used to help us cover this huge county with diverse communities with different needs. And you mentioned also expanding into circulators and van pools, and that piqued my interest because those are things that have been actually bubbling up from our community. We have some efforts beginning right now in our university area and also in the Waimama area. And so I just wonder if you can expand a little bit, explain a little bit more about how such a range of transit options might help us in this county.
Absolutely. First of all, I'm mode agnostic, lack of a better term. I believe in finding out where your needs are and finding the appropriate transit solution to meet those needs. In some cases, that can be rail and other forms of high-capacity transit. In other cases, those could be different types of bus services. And actually, in some cases, that could even mean partnerships with other entities such as ride-sharing companies and things of that nature. So, but the key is to create really a total mobility network to ensure that citizens throughout the county have access to HART services to get them where they want to go. My experience throughout my career has involved implementing different types of transit services to serve specific needs. Most recently in Atlanta, I know you all are going through a comprehensive bus assessment and redesign, and you know, with Mr. Jarrett Walker, we did something similar at MARTA in 2016. And key recommendations from that typically are making routes more efficient, serve more people. It also involves adding tools to your toolbox. And what I mean by that is ensuring, you know, not every bus serves the same purpose. So express buses have limited stops for commuters. You can have frequent local service, but critical components are providing connections to residents and businesses that currently don't have access. And a lot of times, sending a large bus to serve lower density areas is not the solution. It's not the problem that you're trying to solve. You can solve that by providing community circulator service, maybe even flex service, on-demand service, or even partnerships with some of these shared ride companies, all of which we've done in Atlanta as well as in Phoenix. Although I will say when I was in Phoenix, the shared rides weren't quite around yet, but they came quickly. So.
Thank you.
We have time enough for two more questions. Mr. Suarez, Councilman Suarez recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. You know, obviously Super Bowl's coming up on Sunday, and happens to be in Atlanta. What role or do you have, if you do have a role, in helping to plan that? And then the second question is, and then this is a quick question too, which is I've noticed that your board is almost exactly made up the same way that we are, which is, you know, you have three counties in the city of Atlanta and the city of Atlanta, plus a gubernatorial appointee. It's a very similar type board, and it's very diverse. And if you've had any role in dealing with the board directly. So those are the two questions.
Well, my first job with the Super Bowl is to get to your airport as quickly as possible this afternoon, because I will undoubtedly be working at our operations center this evening as we host 1 million visitors for the week-long festivities. We've had both an internal Super Bowl planning committee. I have multiple members of my staff that are part of that team. I think there's 6 total representing that sort of internal task force. And they're responsible for everything, the safety, security of MARTA services, bus rerouting, coordination, communications, marketing, our services throughout the week. We did plenty of partnership programs. We coordinated with stakeholders throughout our service area to ensure that they all knew that they could rely on MARTA to get them where they wanted to go throughout the week. My specific role was to serve on the external Super Bowl planning committee. I specifically was embedded into the transportation and logistics group. And I know you all have hosted several Super Bowls here. And as you know, about a week after the previous Super Bowl ended in Minneapolis, we started meeting in Atlanta to help prepare. So it's been a year-long effort to prepare to provide very efficient service for all of our visitors. So it's a Herculean effort. We have about between 500 and 600 street ambassadors throughout the MARTA system as I speak. So when I return to Atlanta, my role on the executive team, I will be at our what's called our Emergency Operations Center throughout the weekend, making sure all the way through the Super Bowl itself to make sure that we serve all of those customers going to all of the festivities, because there's concerts and other festivals besides just
we're familiar with Super Bowls here.
Game itself.
Not our team,
Absolutely.
but the hosting them, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted my Lions to be there, but I guess I'll settle. And then the board's great question. Currently, yeah, you are correct that the structure of the MARTA board is very similar to the HART board, although they are generally appointed by our member jurisdictions. We currently do not have any elected officials serving on our board, but they are appointed by public officials. My role on the board, I work with them on many of our executive strategies, strategic plans, but also I'm the chair of the Planning and External Relations Committee specifically. That's where I was yesterday morning, was chairing that board meeting. So all of the planning and external relations related items kind of flow through that board subcommittee, and again, my role as chair.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Last question, Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Yes, real quick, I forgot to ask you last night, but we didn't have time. But on diversity, the top, up top there, will you continue to, where you came from and here to make sure that it reflects the city of the Hillsborough County in diversity? Maybe you can touch on that a little, especially African-American, women's, and all throughout.
Absolutely, as well as aligns with the customers that we serve, in addition to the residents of the county. I'm a huge proponent of having a very diverse workforce. My track record throughout my career reflects that. When I build a management team as well as when I build staff, I ensure that there is diversity throughout all levels of our staff to really align with where we are as well as our customer base. I'm very active in the Council of Minority Transportation Officials. As a matter of fact, I was at their event here last week, as well as very active in the Women's Transportation Seminar for several years. This past year, I was very, very fortunate, and probably one of my most humbling accomplishments was named the Ray LaHood Man of the Year for the WTS Atlanta chapter, as really a reflection of my commitment to ensuring diversity throughout my own organization at MARTA. So I hold it very, very high, and I'm very proud of what I've done in my career to date, and I look forward to maintaining that as your next leader.
Mr. Lemon, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you this weekend.
No pressure, right?
Okay, we're now in deliberation, and after that, we'll see what we have. We go for a vote. Anyone? No one? I figured you would, Ms. Kemp.
I waited. I just want to say that I think we had two impressive candidates, but I think that Mr. Limmer is everything I would have ever wanted or imagined in someone to bring HART forward. I feel like he has a depth of diverse experience to bring to the table, managing people, managing budgets, obviously interacting with the community, the strength of responses, and I asked about that before, about involving TOD, land use. He just, I think, is, and his presentation I thought was extraordinarily strong. So I'm very impressed. I feel like he is a excellent candidate, and I'll be supporting Mr. Limmer for moving forward.
Anyone else?
I'll just echo those comments. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Do you need a motion?
I need a motion.
I'll move that we appoint Benjamin Limmer as the CEO.
There's a motion by Ms. Shanahan, a second by Ms. Williams and Mr. Harden and Commissioner Kemp to appoint Mr. Limmer as our next CEO. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let me know by raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Hand. Unanimous.
Great. Okay. And if I could, Chair, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Moser for going through this whole process, getting two very qualified candidates. I hope that you make sure that you tell Ms. Butler that she was extremely impressive. It is one of those positions that, it is never easy to make these decisions, but at the same time, her experience is great, and if she had had some of the bigger agency experience, I think she might have been much closer to this, but we appreciate what you've done. You've done a terrific job. Thanks so much.
Hold on, folks. Whoa. Y'all moving too fast. Mr. Moser, thank you very much. We appreciate that very much. I would like to, if there's no objection, direct our general counsel to work on a contract with Mr. Limmer to bring that back, I guess, as March board meeting.
And Chair, if you need a motion, I'll be glad to do that.
That'll be fine. We have a motion by Mr. Suarez, Councilman Suarez, second by Ms. Shanahan, to allow our general counsel to work on a contract with Mr. Limmer to be brought back at our March 4th board meeting. Any questions? See none. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to commend, great decision. And but I also wanted to comment if Mr. Moser could pass on to Ms. Butler. She did a great job and made this a very difficult decision and was a very competitive candidate. And it was just a great process. Thank you.
Someone said you got to apply for the Atlanta job. Ms. Williams, if next.
Thank you. I just wanted to also say, Mr. Moser, the meeting we held last week and the level of detail you provided was instrumental to us moving forward today. We had lots of questions and concerns alike, and at the end of the day, you cleared our minds and you gave us the opportunity to move forward with specific details and reality of the results, and also the metrics across the board and what's happening in other areas. So I just want to thank you, because if it were not for that meeting, we probably would not be where we are today. So thank you.
Commissioner Overman, your comments.
Thank you. I want to echo both Councilman Suarez and Ms. Kemp's comments, but I'll also recognize we ended up, thank you, Mr. Moser, with some terrific candidates. Literally, I was back and forth, because Ms. Butler's demeanor, her style, all of that was just so excellent that even though she had a much smaller, universe to work within, I saw her as an absolutely terrific candidate. So thank you for making our job really hard. But I'm excited about moving forward with Mr. Limmer. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moser, you flying back today. It's snowing in Washington right now.
That's correct. I want to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to work with you. I'll work with council to help in structuring a contract and bringing bringing it to you for the vote in March. And if there's anything else I can do, please let me know.
Thank you very much, sir. Interim Chief Executive Director's report.
I have nothing.
You have nothing. My report is, thank the Lord it's over. I am so glad that it's out the way. That's all I got to say. I'm done. General Counsel report.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Okay. You have the committee reports in your binders. We'll now move to public input on general concerns. Are there anyone from the public wishing to address us today? We have 3 minutes. Seeing none. Is there any old business? Yes, sir.
Just very briefly. There was mention.
Come to the microphone, sir. No, just
I'm sorry, what?
Come to the microphone.
Okay. There were some questions that revolved around the funding constraints until January and public outreach. I just wanted to bring to your attention that there are organizations here in Hillsborough County that if you reach to those organizations, they'll be more than happy to help you with public outreach, and they'll do it for nothing. I just want to let you know.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else? Any old business? Any new business? Any?
The timing of the March 4th.
Oh, yes. March 4th is a meeting date, but also that's the day for the parade and luncheon for the Strawberry Festival. And I know some of our commissioners will probably be participating in that. So I would like to see if it's a consensus that we, instead of meeting at 9, that we meet at 8 a.m. that day. So that some of you who want to be in the parade or whatever the case may be would like to go. Is there any objection to that? No objection, 8 o'clock, March 4th.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll adjourn.